Nick, why don't you start? What did you like the least about President Obama?
I didn't like all the cronies being appointed to cabinet positions. Like a lot of the people he appointed to cabinet positions, judicial level officials, and department heads or administrators. They were all cronies. You know, either Clinton era cronies, Republican cronies, and these are all people that we needed to kind of avoid and start pulling in. Maybe start pulling from more of the activist community. He just appointed too many cronies that didn't have the interest of the common people into cabinet positions, and they were running a lot of the administration, and that was a big disappointment. If you're going to go in a different direction, you need to pull from a different pool of people. So that was a large failing of his.
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, he's the deporter in chief, on top of the millions of bombs that he dropped, especially on innocents. I mean, for me, those are major issues.
Wait a minute. Is that supposed to be the thing that you hated the most?
The fact that he,
No. I was gonna say, because I forgot the question. If it was the thing that I hated the most,
yeah, like the thing.
I'm not being that strict. And don't be petty, because if you're gonna say when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize
and use Martin Luther King's name to justify ramping up the drone war while accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, that was the thing I hated the most. I was most angry with Barack Obama at that moment.
So like that's the thing, right? It's very hard to just to rank what he did in terms of like from bad to worst, right? So we can talk about the way he deported over 2.5 million illegal undocumented workers. We could talk about the ways in which he up the active, well, not active wars. I don't know how you would describe. And I know how you would describe it, but I feel like we're just being semantic at that certain point. The way in which he expanded the drone program, made it less transparent, punished whistleblowers. The way he, at various points, demonized the black community when he went out in front of Baltimore and called young black people who were protesting thuggish. Implied that they were criminals. Like there are a lot of bad marks on his presidency, and so it's frustrating to watch people now start, for lack of a better term, whitewash it, right? To whitewash his presidency as just look how cool he was. And basically do what I did at the beginning and really just focus on his inherent blackness and the positive role that played for America. When I did it tongue in cheek. I wasn't being incredibly serious about it. Like I recognize that is a benefit, that did have some kind of benefit to America, but it's like Nick says, the bad just so far outweighs the good that. And for every good thing I point out, like commuting Chelsea Manning's sentence, it comes down to, well, why not Edward Snowden? Why not all of these other people? Like he doesn't have a limited number of these things. Pardoning 1,000 nonviolent drug offenders. Why not? Like as he did, he amped up the war on drugs. It becomes like this. He did these very large performative actions, right? He was very good at speaking to the left. He was very good at speaking the right language and even engaging in a few actions that, if you only paid attention to the headlines in the mainstream media, you would go, he's pretty progressive. He pardoned 1,000 nonviolent drug offenders. Like that's not that many, really. Like our prisons are full of nonviolent drug offenders. So let's keep going. Let's keep unpacking Obama's presidency and really why we should not be seeking to get 4 more years out of him. Why we should not be, because like this is the trend, right? This is what we're seeing now. This is what's incredibly frustrating and also very frightening. You have Trump, who, for lack of a better term, is a neo-fascist. He is he represents the most vocal, worst in society of racism, sexism, authoritarianism. He's cartoonish in his excess. And then you have people who are so afraid of him that they are running towards the precursor. They're just like, well, let's not seek to tackle the causes of things. Let's not seek to tackle them. Let's simply just let's just dial it back a few, let's go from 11 back to 9. Like so to a more manageable level.
I mean, and what would you think if in my opinion, I think really the way Obama should be viewed is he's a more well-spoken version of George W. Bush. In that really the two aren't that far apart. Bush started the wars in the Middle East. Obama amped it up to a level that it really should never have been amped up to. George W. Bush crashed the economy with a lot of deregulations. Obama was kind of like, well, I see what you did. Let me just bail these guys out and not actually change the system that came before it, but double down on these things. Instead of going to the bankers at a time where they were so vulnerable when they would have done whatever he said, that they would have just had to have bent over backwards because they couldn't have done it by themselves. Instead, he went like, okay, well, you guys, here's a payout for doing these really terrible things. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's George W. Bush round 2, but better spoken than a Democrat.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. It's like just like that's a good place to start, right? So in 2009, at the height of the housing collapse, where everyone is still reeling, that the banks are extremely vulnerable. It's finally time to start breaking them up. They have nothing. They can't defend themselves at this point. Barack Obama stands in front of the heads of these banks and says, "I'm going to be the shield between you and the masses, like you and like the pitchfork wielding masses. Like you don't need to be afraid of them. I'm going to protect you." And from that point on, we see this sort of slow trickle away of all these progressive ideals. But go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, let's put more context on what Adair just said. George W. Bush is considered possibly one of the worst presidents of modern history. Now,
he wasn't until he hugged Obama. He wasn't until he hugged Michelle Obama. Now he's fine.
Okay, so that is kind of where he was when he left office, and Barack Obama comes in and continues a large majority of his policies. So, what does that tell you about Barack Obama? If George Bush was the worst and Barack Obama just continued and in many cases made worse many of his policies, what does that say? I mean, what does that say about this progressive president, this liberal president, this competent president, this great, cool president? You know what that says? What? That says maybe your opposition to Bush was more about what they told you should think about Bush rather than looking at his actual policies. Or, on the other hand, maybe your view of Obama is more informed about what they're telling you should think about Obama rather than his actual policies.
That's a great point. And it's also, and this, again, back to Rob Evans' conversation, it's also this sort of this relief that our political system instills in us, right? When a Democrat comes into office, at least on the left, that okay, the Democrats are in charge now. You can stop paying attention, and because that's what would have happened if Clinton would have won, right? For everyone saying that we were going to hold her feet to the fire, the vast majority of Americans would stop paying attention. And if the quote unquote new media, we're gonna hold her accountable by informing Americans, the vast majority of people would have stopped paying attention because they are conditioned to believe that once the Democrat gets in office, well, not vast majority, but the left rather, are conditioned to believe, well, once the Democrats in office, this comes down to the way we do politics, our political culture, right? So we operate on crisis management. The language that we use during the general election is all about the apocalypse, this upcoming crisis. If you don't vote for me, the world is going to end. And I think this time, really, that was mobilized so heavily on the left. Usually, I feel as though that is normally the rhetoric of the right, right? I feel like that's not hard to say that. The right normally mobilizes apocalyptic rhetoric as it pertains to the left, that if they're morally bankrupt, they want abortions for everyone and, free condoms for your babies. It doesn't, all these things. But this time, the Clinton campaign really did paint Trump as the apocalypse. And we've had this conversation before, the dangers of doing that, especially when they couldn't seal that deal, where people are now so afraid of Trump. And how much are they actually afraid of Trump's policies? And how much are they just afraid of things that were attributed to him that he didn't necessarily say or believe? And of course, Trump is horrific, obviously, he's a monster, but him being a monster doesn't make Obama a saint. Right. It makes him, a lesser of two evils. And, how do we get that? People speak a big game when it comes to that, but how do we get people to actually internalize that and deal critically what it means to be the lesser of two evils? Not good. Not how do we stop people from going, okay, this is the subjective good and turn it to the objective good? So Obama got a pass because Bush was so bad, irrespective of policy. That's why he won that Nobel Peace Prize, right? Because it was a comparative thing. It was an issue of comparison.
But what were they comparing on? It wasn't the policy. It's the same thing.
Right. Well,
see, that's what I don't understand. You
I
know,
think
what,
the
what makes
comparison
Barack Obama so much better? The differences are so small.
It's his blackness. That's what makes him better. Like, I mean, that idea is danced around.
Exact opposite.
No. And here's why. It's danced around so often by people in general. But when I have conversations with people, and I think generally when we have conversations with people, a lot of it comes down to Obama's black and the idea that we had elected somebody who was mixed, a black man as president of the United States, was seen as such a progressive forward moment. The end of racism is here. America's really a meritocracy. Look, a black guy made it to the presidency. And that's what it was held up as. Obama was supposed to be this glowing standard for American progressivism as such as social progress, as in we're no longer racist. See, we have a black president. I think that's what it is. It comes back to that he was black, he was cool, and it resonated to a fantastic degree with all sorts of people. It doesn't mean he was great. His policies, like you said, were the same as Bush's.
Worse.
Yeah.
I mean, worse. He suspended habeas corpus. He engaged. Well, I guess that is engaging in the he removed due process from the. It's just a horrific record, but. And I think Adair hits nail on the head. Like a lot of it's because he's America's black friend, right? He's all of America's black friend, and he provided this very, very convenient mask for the quote unquote left to disguise themselves as anything other than only slightly less racist and sexist than the right.